President during the BP oil spill and its aftermath in the Gulf. Now, there are a couple of things we learned from that experience. Number one, I don't know if you knew this, the President's Energy Secretary, he's got a Nobel Prize. I know because I heard this almost every 2 minutes coming out of the President. It was almost like he used that title so often, I almost thought that was the guy's name. My Nobel Prize winning, I don't know what that had to do with the oil spill, but every other word, it was my Nobel Prize winning Energy Secretary. It became very apparent the President didn't trust the average American people, but rather relied on these so-called experts. And so as that oil got closer and closer to our coast, we kept wondering why the government wouldn't allow us to do more to protect ourselves. We began to learn, a local said this, when they tell you that help is coming tomorrow, that doesn't mean help is coming tomorrow. That just means help is not coming today. That's all that means when they say help is coming. But it was so frustrating to see that oil come closer and closer to our coast, to hear the President continue to rely on these experts. He refused to meet with the fishermen, refused to go see the oil for himself. Finally, one day, there was a local fisherman who got so frustrated by this. He was meeting with me, he said, Governor, I don't understand it. This oil is coming close to our coast, it's going to eat our wetlands, eat away at our estuaries, destroy our livelihood, our way of life. He said, I understand why we're just waiting for it. He said, why don't we go out there and vacuum that oil up before it gets to us? I said, that's a great idea. Called up the White House and said, why don't we go vacuum that oil up before it gets to our coast? And they acted like I was an idiot. They said, Governor, you know that oil's out in the middle of the water. How are you going to get a vacuum truck out? There are no roads down there. Now look, to be fair, I don't have a Nobel Prize like the President and his energy secretary. I said, look, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but why don't we put a truck on the back of a boat and go get that oil? And I hate this answer from the federal government. They said, no, we can't do that. We've never done that before, so we can't try that. Well, they've never spilled this much oil before. Why not try something different? But they refused to do it. So I ordered the National Guard to build 2 prototypes to show them this could be done. Now, we've got the finest men and women in our Louisiana National Guard. They've been in Iraq, they've been in Afghanistan, they've been in Haiti. But here's the problem. We don't have a Navy. So we really don't have a whole lot of ships just sitting around waiting for this kind of thing. So the first 2 prototypes, I'll admit, looked a little funny. I mean, the first one was literally a truck strapped onto the back of a barge. This thing didn't look like it was going to float. National reporter came down to cover the first sailing. He looked at it, looked at me and said, Governor, aren't those the same trucks you used to clean out your porta potties on Friday night after the football games? I said, please don't put that in your newspaper. I mean, it's true, but people all over the country will think I'm crazy. I mean, you've got a porta potty truck strapped on the back of a barge. I think it's insane. You had a guy back there with a hose picking up oil out of the water. And you know what? It worked. They picked up thousands of gallons of oil, and a week later, I love this about the private sector, they called me up and said, Governor, they saw this on TV, they said, please stop using trucks. We got industrial pumps. And don't use those barges. We got industrial boats. We can do this right. They had dozens of these working, picking up thousands of gallons of oil out of that water before it got to our coast. And then I got the phone call. A week later, the White House called us up and said, we're shutting down your barges. We've actually already shut them down. Order them back in the port. I said, why? This is the first thing that's working. They said, we haven't done our inspections yet. So what do you need to inspect? They said, we need to check the valves. Because if you don't use the right valves, there's a chance you might drop some oil back into the water. I said, we're picking up thousands of gallons of oil. You're worried about drops? They said, those are the rules. I said, that's the most absurd thing I've ever heard. I said, you got 24 hours before we order them back into the water. I said, why can't you inspect them while they're doing their work? They said, nope, those are the rules. National media heard about this. I guess they realized how absurd it was because later, several hours later, they called back and said, all right, never mind, we're not going to check the valves. But they still have to stay in the port. Because now we need to do our inspections to count the number of life jackets and fire extinguishers on those boats. I I said, why can't you do that while they're doing their work instead of stopping them? And again, they said, those are the rules. Almost 24 hours later, I was on my way to the port to see those boats for myself, and I got the call saying, I guess they realized how absurd this all had become. They said, never mind, we've canceled our inspections. The barges can go back to work. We don't need to count the life jackets anymore. But here's what we learned. You think not only that time they had wasted, while we could have been out there fighting that oil, you see what happens when you've got the most liberal, the most incompetent president since Jimmy Carter in the White House. That's what happens when you've got President Obama.